You've probably attended several parties where the conversation has revolved around buying a house. And a lot of people of a certain age have probably told you that they acquired this property at this extremely low value a couple of decades ago, and now it's worth a couple of crores. And you're wondering, why don't you go out and buy the first property that becomes available to you? Well, it's not as easy as that. There are a lot of factors that you need to consider. Let's talk about some of them. And let's introduce our guest for the day. We've got Kartik Jhaveri, who is the founder and director at Transcend Consulting India. Thank you so much, Kartik, for taking the time. Always a pleasure speaking with you. And this is a debate that we've had in the past, right, about buying versus renting. Have you added more nuances to that conversation, first of all? And what do you need to bear in mind when you go out shopping for a house?
Alex, it's not only now, but it's probably 500 years ago also. Kings were also interested in acquiring more real estate. And so are politicians, and so are you and I. I mean, the lure of real estate is so huge that one just can't add any nuance to it. So I keep answering the same thing every now and then. But the basic thing remains the same. Can I not have a house? And, the feeling is that when you're paying a rent, you're paying the money to somebody else. It's money which goes out of your pocket in a one-way street, and you don't get anything in return for your money. But the point to really think about is that what you're paying is less than about 2% in larger cities, of course, like Mumbai, Delhi, etc. And it might take you like 50 years, which is pretty much your entire working span, or much more than that, to acquire the cost of that house that you're living in. So you rather acquire what you really think that you will spend as your retirement home, or what you want to give as legacy to your children and grandchildren, versus keeping the flexibility to yourself, move around the country, move around the world, and pay a very, very tiny cost, which you can easily afford out of your rent. Out of your salary or out of your income.
About that a little bit more, Kartik, because that really is the core aspect of that decision, right? The rental yield, as it is called. Now, a lot of people don't consider this. They think about the high cost. So, for example, if you're talking about even a 1 BHK in the suburbs in Mumbai, you're talking about rent that goes up to 40,000 rupees in certain cases, depending on the size of the property. And if you go to Bandra or you go to some other places, if you go to South Bombay, the cost is even higher. So people look at that rental value and they miss the larger picture. How would you explain rental yield?
So what happens in very simplistic terms is, let us say the cost of a property is 1 crore as an example. And if you were to take that property on purchase, let's say you would have to take a loan of about 80 to 90 lakhs, which means your EMI would be about 80 to 90,000. Now compare that with the fact that the same 1 crore house, if you wanted to get in as a rental property, you wanted to only pay rent for it, the rent of that home would be somewhere in the range of about, say, 20% or 15 to 20,000, which is nothing but about 2% of that value. So on one side, 15 to 20,000 rupees rental for that property versus paying about 80 to 90,000 as EMI to own the property. See, the disparity is huge. So basically what we say is that if I have a property for 1 crore and if I'm getting it at a rental of 2 lakhs a year, which is approximately 16,000 rupees a month, then we say that the rental return or the rental yield is 2% of the property. So it is rent divided by the current market value of that property. And that is what would give you the answer of your rental yield. And versus that, can you use your money wisely or not? That's the second question that we explore.
Absolutely. But what about the argument, and this is something that is, the debate goes to the next stage where you say, look, what about the security that your own house affords you? And of course, you can counter that by saying that it is mortgaged. Until you finish paying off the loan, you don't really own the property. But let's go with the argument. What about the security that buying a house gives you?
Alex, the security that buying a house gives is priceless. Okay. The fact that you have your own roof, it also gives you a sense of pride. It makes you feel that you have achieved something in life. It makes you feel empowered. It makes you feel financially strong and stable. Although it might be on a mortgage and you might be paying EMIs, doesn't matter. Because you tell yourself that if things go really wrong, if things go really negative or south, then I can always sell my house and pay off my loan, and I can still be absolutely okay. It's a very, very good and a positive sort of a feeling. Now, having said that, one must use financial sense into the whole thing. So look at your life. What are you doing in your life? What sort of profession or occupation are you following? Are you self-employed? Are you, running a business? Are you sort of salaried? Now, let's, for example, take the easiest one. Say you're salaried. If you're salaried, and if you think that you are going to be located only in that city, you were born in a city, let's say Mumbai, for example, you will work in Mumbai, you will not take any transfer out anywhere to any other city of the country or of the world. You will stay here, you will retire in Mumbai. Then by all means, you want to buy a property in Mumbai, because you want to call it your own versus having to worry about where to move every 3 years. But if you're in a job, if you're not from Mumbai, say if you're from, example, if you're from Indore and you've studied in Delhi, you've come to Mumbai for the purpose of employment, then 2-3 years down the line, you might move to another city. You might want to change your job. You might want more growth. Today you are in Mumbai. Tomorrow you might be, in Hong Kong. And the third, stint of your career, you might be in New York. So you want to have flexibility. You want to have mobility, and you don't want to have, appendages and baggage tied down to you. So you don't want to have to worry about a property, then give it out on rent, then have it maintained, property tax, so on and so forth. Property is like a white elephant. So you buy it if you really need it, point number one. And point number two, you buy it exactly at the location where you think you eventually will go. So if you're from Nashik or if you're from Indore, and if you think that that's the place that you would like to settle down, or that's where your parents live, and or that's where a large part of your family lives, and that's a place that you'll be happy to, to retire into, and maybe consider buying a place there. Now, if you're, of course, self-employed, or if you're a business owner, then the dynamics are different for you. And you may have, property purchase even as a strategic decision, as a part of using as a guest house, or, for your employees or whatever may be. But that's a different story. So I would think your need and your ultimate purpose, and where are you going to use it and how are you going to use it, that should decide whether or not you should buy a property in the first place or not.
I have the next stage, which now is people who say that they will buy a relatively smaller house, and when they are able to fund the next purchase, they will sell this first house and use the proceeds to buy the second house. So in a sense, they are moving up in life. So in a sense, yes, they are using that asset, and they're also treating it like an investment. There are also other people who buy a second house thinking, hey, you know what, at some point I might have kids, or at some point my kids will inherit this. So they acquire this as an asset. It's also an investment. It's something that gives you rent. Now, should you consider real estate or residential property as an investment? That's the question for you.
Okay, so let's break it into two parts. Let's first talk about the fact that we are upgrading ourselves. That's a very usual thing to do. Whether it's a house that you're buying, from a 1 BHK to a 2, or a 2 to a 3, or a 3 to a 5, whatever be the case. That depends again on your need. It should not be for purposes other than absolute use. I mean, if you're buying it to make your ego satisfied and things like that, then I don't think that's such a wise financial decision. But again, if you need it, and your kids are growing up, you need separate rooms for that, your parents are living with you, you want to have office space, you want to have a room dedicated for office, then obviously the need is very well pronounced, and therefore you may want to move up. And obviously it helps because you're moving from one place to the other. Perfectly logical, by all means do it. And I would even add a little tip to it. If you can afford a 2-bedroom, try and aim for a third one. Stretch a little bit more, because if you stretch a little bit more, remember, it's coming on a loan, and in a few years time your income would improve. Obviously it's gone up, so you will be able to accommodate that quite nicely. Because when you actually look for a higher place or a larger place, it's going to be costing you more. So may as well try and take a larger leap today if that's possible. And that's always a little tip for real estate: stretch a little more. Now, coming from the other side, should you buy real estate as an investment and from the rental point of view, or to leave as a legacy point of view? By all means do that, but that should become your asset in the list of priorities. My suggestion is, let that be your third or the fourth priority. So first you want to have basic investments, then you want to have growth investments like your mutual funds and stocks and things like that, which are liquid in nature, which are going to help you from your retirement point of view, so on and so forth. And then maybe at the third level or the fourth level, if there is further surplus fund, you may want to buy property. Because remember, the real pleasure of earning a rent from the property will never happen in your life. It's going to happen in your child's life. So haven't you heard of stories where somebody tells you, today I'm earning a rent of 2 lakh rupees per month in this property. But did you know that in 1974, when my dad bought this property, he actually bought the property for only some 60,000 rupees. And today I'm earning 2 lakh rupees per month as a rent. So the joy and the might and the power of, actually seeing the investment fructify from a property will actually happen to the second generation and will not happen to you in your life most of the times, you see. Or it might happen to you when you are like really, into your retirement and things like that. It needs such a long space of time to have elapsed for you to see, wow, this was a great investment. So if you're going to, use that money more productively in your life, maybe do something else. But to give it as a legacy, sure, you can do it. But priority number 3 or 4 or 5.
Okay, speaking of priorities, now there are a lot of people that I have also spoken to that prioritize buying a house very early. And they do this to the detriment, Kartik, of other what should be priorities in life, which is, for example, setting aside a certain amount of money for your old age, for your retirement, because you get the ball rolling early and it's very beneficial in terms of compounding and all of that. So they say a large portion of their salary will go, or their income will go towards paying off the loan for the house. Is there a cap that they should put on the amount that they spend towards this EMI? And how should they balance the two? They need to save on an ongoing basis for their other goals as well.
You're right, absolutely, Alex. Because look at the gratification factor here. The moment you buy a real estate, you can actually see it, touch it, feel it. You can see it in front of your eyes. You can even live in it. And although you're paying EMIs for it and you have no other money to save for anything else, you still can touch, feel, and see it, right? Whereas talk about a retirement, you don't even know where you will be then in the next 30 or 40 years. So that's the dilemma, and which is why for an uncertain thing, you don't want to, give it a thought, but something which is right, ready, and in present and in front of you, you want to immediately go and, enjoy that activity. So yeah, by all means, you can do it, no problem to that. But I would think a good estimate to work up with is about 30%, which means if you're earning 100 rupees, basically, 30% of that, which is about 30 rupees, whatever that number works out to, is a very fair and healthy number to be your EMI for your residential property or for the property that you're buying, be it residential, commercial, whatever you like, because we're talking of investments here. So out of the 100 rupees you're earning, I'm assuming 50 you spend for your lifestyle and for your living expenses. I am hoping that you save about 10 to 20% of your money out of that for any particular use, whether it's a short-term use or a long-term use, whether to buy a car or to save for your retirement. But at least 10 to 20% goes in savings, that I'm assuming. So therefore, that leaves that leaves us with about 30%, give or take. And in that 30%, then you go and afford your EMI for whichever property you want to buy. So I would think if you go with a 30% cap, it's a good idea.
Okay, fair enough. I think we've covered most of the bases, and of course, I'm sure my viewers have already been educated of this fact. When you go for the new regime in terms of the income tax, you don't get the benefit of Section 24, which allows you to reduce your taxable income to the extent of your home loan interest rate. But always a pleasure speaking with you, Kartik. Thank you so much for joining in. I hope that our conversation has provided the insight that somebody needed in the decision of whether or not to buy or rent.
Thank you, Alex.